I have a point of view about the Indian consumer and the Indian consumer who is not us, right? Which is what broadly, colloquially called as the Bharat audience, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Hopefully it's interesting for you because it's a very interesting topic for me, right? I'm Mithun. I've spent a lot of time building consumer products for the non-English speaking audience, right? Most recently at ShareChat and Apna. Odds are you folks have not heard about these products, right? ShareChat and MoEngage, regional language social media, roughly 200, 300 million monthly active users across the both of them, $1 billion in venture funding raised, but very, very low on the startup radar, right? The way I like to contextualize it, somebody in Swiggy sneezes, that's front page news. These products are making revenue, impacting lives, nobody cares, right? So both of these places I led engagement product, worked a little bit on revenue across all kinds of content creation, discovery, engagement, launched the largest live audio chat room in India, which was for a brief period the top grossing free app on the Play Store as well, right? Apna is a professional network for the grey collar audience, which is, to say an easy way to visualize this is LinkedIn for a non-English speaking audience and built in reverse, right? So LinkedIn was very much content, network, and then jobs. Apna went jobs, network, and then content, right? There again, I was leading product for the engagement and the professional network part. Right now, I'm doing the fashionable thing. I've been on sabbatical for a few months. I thought I know a lot of this stuff, so let's put some gyan out in the world and see what comes of it. So I run my own newsletter. I write about the Indian consumer, as I said. I consult some early and growth stage startups who are working and building for this audience. And something I'm also doing is running a small product management course on the side, right? Today, as I said, we'll talk about the Bharat consumer. Why Bharat? Because I don't know too much about generative AI, plus Ravi's already done that part, right? So that's one. More importantly, I think that this is a very, very large opportunity, which is not talked about enough. And hence, there are a lot of misconceptions, right? And I'll talk a little bit about those misconceptions later on. Mostly, these misconceptions are around who the consumer is. What are the opportunities? How do you build for them? Is it even possible to make money, right? A combination of these misconceptions leads to some very damaging narratives for the ecosystem, which I hopefully will put right through this conversation. Okay, let's talk about us first, right? We are what is colloquially called the India 1 consumer, which is the top 30 to 60 million online transactors, right? This is a chart from my friends over at Bloom Ventures. They write a very nice report about the Indian consumer called the Indus Valley Report. This chart talks about all the online transacting users, right? Right up there is total internet subscribers, 700 million. At the bottom, stock traders, 10 to 15 million. Somewhere in the middle is where people say, hey, these are the guys who are India 1, right? Who are regular online transactors. Depending on how you look at it, that number could be between 30 and 60 million, right? For example, Zomato has 50 million annual transacting users. Disney has a 50 million subscriber base. Netflix, which is considered premium, has only around 6 million subscribers, right? And these subscribers drive a large majority of the online consumption in India, right? As Bloom says, there's a very, very significant power law in all of these transactions. And this is, I mean, to a certain extent, true of any economy, right? There will be people at the top who drive, in terms of value, a large percentage of the consumption. But people say that in India, it's a little bit too skewed, right? The problem with all of this, right, of course, 60 million transactors is not a small number, right? If you go out and capture a decent number of that audience and build products for them, you can make a sizable business. The problem, though, is everybody is after these guys, right? If you think about the last 2 years, maybe 2 years ago, you were shopping on Myntra for different kind of products. Over 2 years, especially this audience, there's a lot of unbundling of Myntra that has happened, right? So now there's premium brands across different apparel categories, all trying to get you to buy from their own website, right? And that's something in my head that's not sustainable, right? How long can you go after the same group of consumers and say, hey, give me a share of wallet? At some point, companies like MoEngage are going to say, hey, we can only send 100 notifications to a consumer, right? You can't go 101. A small example to sort of illustrate this barrier, right? So Good news for the overall tech ecosystem. Q1 results of Zomato said they're finally PAT positive, hoping they didn't do any accounting gapla here, and it's actual profit after tax. Revenue went up, bunch of things. Everybody's like, yes, this works. But interesting numbers. Monthly transacting users in Q1, which was the latest report, 17.5 million. 9 months ago, the same number, right? So in 9 months, their monthly transacting user base has remained flat, right? Which means these guys have already reached the ceiling of the India one consumer, right? Everybody, not just Zomato, everybody very soon is now going to think about, okay, how do I expand beyond the ceiling? Otherwise, a lot of the stories that people have sold about cross-selling, upselling, large consumer audience, it's all going to come crashing down, right? On the other hand, though, right, like there's a very clear and obvious market for free question mark content, right? And I've been in that industry for a long time, so I can speak a little bit about it. India, people spend 2.5 hours on social media, right? After Nigeria and Philippines. This is, of course, 2021 data. I don't expect it to have changed. Maybe we've gone up, right? Like everybody's on their phone nowadays. Short form video is all the rage over the last 2-3 years, especially since TikTok came and went, and ShareChat and MoEngage were big beneficiaries of that. In 2020, there were 200 million monthly active users spending 55 minutes, expected to go 3x by 2025 with an increase in time spent, right? So massive market for that kind of audience. But what this leads to is, and I talked about some of the damaging narratives about this consumer. India is an MAU farm for global companies, right? Actually, this graphic is something that I made and put out in my newsletter. I was making the completely opposite point, right? I was making the point that, hey, this is today. But the reason these companies are in India is because they see potential, right? And what kind of potential is what, of course, I wrote about. But unfortunately, Twitter is not a platform for nuance. And this is what gets eyeballs, right? So this obviously went on, became big when I was trying to make the completely opposite point, right? Again, leading to things like Bharat consumers don't pay, Indian SMEs don't pay, Intuit detracted their QuickBooks product, I think a year or so ago, which again led to a lot of articles, debt of the Indian consumer, nobody can make money in India, you have to build vertical SaaS for a US audience, et cetera, right? So let's pause and ask some very fundamental questions, right? When we say, okay, the Bharat consumer doesn't pay, we really need to understand who this person is, right? And how do you visualize? And there are a lot of marketers and product people in the audience. It's important to visualize who this person is and get that visualization correct, because otherwise you'll go and send the wrong message, build the wrong product, and then, of course, that guy won't pay, right? Fundamentally, do we think that this person can pay? How do we look at the numbers around this micro section of the economy? And have there been entities in the past who've been able to make this audience pay, right? And we'll go through these questions and hopefully form a narrative around all of this. Okay, the first thing, the Bharat consumer is heterogeneous, right? A lot of people think that Bharat means ki matlab the automatic visualization is it's a Hindi-speaking user, right? And there is a certain bias to that, but Hindi is spoken by only 40% of the population, and we're all from Delhi, so we understand that even within that 40%, there's a Haryanvi, there's a Western UP dialect of Hindi. Within MP, there's probably 3 different dialects. Bihar, of course, has its own cultural milieu. So this is not really a very large chunk, right? When you're saying Hindi is 40%, 60% is other languages. Even with Hindi, it's very diverse, right? So calling this person a Bharat consumer automatically puts you in the wrong boat, right? Then you're suddenly saying, acha, we have to communicate to this person in Hindi, which is probably not the right way to go about it. The other thing that it does is, again, a lot of cultural influences. Bharat is not villages, right? 20% of India's population, probably this was 3 years ago data, lives in tier 2, 3, 4 towns like Meerut, Vizag, Vishakhapatnam, etc., which are in their own right are bustling economies, right? And you will see a microcosm of the India growth story there, right? So it's not just villages, although of course, yes, 50% of the population still resides in what we call villages, but that's not the connotation that we want to take away when we're defining this consumer, right? About propensity to pay. Fundamentally, is there money in this audience? to pay for anything? I believe yes, there is a lot of money to be made. I don't think Bharat is automatically low income, which is another sort of fallacy that people make when they think about this consumer, right? Again, my friends from Bloom, they have this data which says the top 120 million consumers in India have around 12,000 US dollars of GDP per capita. The next 100 million is 3,000 US dollars, right? Fair. Again, there will be a power law. There is going to be a distribution. But there's a little bit of nuance to an Indian context when you think about these numbers, right? I'm sure all of us or a majority of us have roots in villages, right? Where either our parents or our grandparents have been from villages or smaller towns. And you think about how consumption happens there, a large percentage of the economy is informal, right? We have a very low direct tax base. And a large percentage of our population is engaged in agriculture in some form or the other where you don't have to pay taxes, right? If you take all of these three things together and then say, okay, I'm going to look at GDP per capita, which is a recorded metric from formal numbers, and define if people are going to be able to pay, I think that's the wrong way to look at it, right? Because then you're leaving out a large percentage of the population and the amount of money they potentially can spend, right? In fact, there's a report in 2015 that talks about the shadow GDP of India, which was estimated to be around 20% higher than the reported GDP, right? And again, I mean, yeah, we're in Delhi, so we're used to big weddings. Just look back at the last wedding you attended and think about what kind of income tax returns that person might have filed, right? And that'll anecdotally give you a picture of whether this person can pay or not, right? So these are all some vacuous, superficial narratives that take us in the wrong direction. Who's been making money of these guys, right? This is very interesting. The OG of micropayments, FMCG, right? I have a lot of respect for FMCG folk. Over the last 20, 30 years, they've gone deep into the hinterlands, figured out what products work, how to market them, what is the audience, and made tons of money in the process, right? Interesting story about sachayization, which every marketer would probably know. HUL is credited with doing this for shampoos in the early 90s. But a couple of decades before that, there was a person called Chinni Krishnan in a small town in Tamil Nadu called Cuddalore, who actually sold talcum powder in small sachets of 20 grams, right? And that person and his son began the empire that is called Cabin Care today, a very large FMCG company. So sachayization is not new to the Indian universe, right? This is an insight that people have had for a long time, that if you need to get mass market audience to pay, you need to think a little bit differently, right? So that's FMCG and micropayments, right? In the digital world, everybody is talking about micropayments. It's been around for a while. Everybody knows this person, but do people remember this avatar of this person, right? I was in Delhi, I was in school at this time, around a couple of decades ago. I'm a little bit old that way. The movie came out, it's called Tere Naam, him and Bhumika Chawla. Literally within a week, everybody had this hairstyle across income groups, right? If you went to a barber shop, the guy giving you the haircut had this hairstyle, right? So that's the kind of pervasive hold Salman Khan has on the mass market audience. Again, people in the film industry have realized what people will pay for, how to market to them, message to them, what is the product, right? Little known fact, South India, I'm from Kerala, so I know a little bit about this as well. South India has a very, very tight culture around movies, right? There are around 1,000 registered movie star fan clubs with a total of 500,000 members in Tamil Nadu itself, right? And when you see, I don't know if you follow regional news, when new movies come out, you'll see people doing milk abhishek and all of that on the statues of these big stars, and that's been done by these groups, right? So Bollywood, of course, has figured out how to make this audience pay. And we can't be very far from spirituality. India is the land of gods and spirituality. Estimated $40 billion US market for spirituality and religion associated things. Almost all of it unorganized, right? Tirupati's yearly earnings are around $200 million US. And it's only one temple, right? And you, in your state, probably can pick out 5 large temples which have large followings, right? So there are entities, both legacy and in the world of tech, who've managed to make money, right? Paytm Soundbox, this is a fantastic product innovation. The first time I heard Paytm pe X rupees prapt hue at some sabji wala, I felt all sorts of bells going off in my head as a product person. I was like, boss, why did nobody else think of this? They're solving a bunch of UX, payment, friction problems through this absolutely wonderful device and making tons of money off it. 150 million US dollars in Q3 FY 2023 gross revenue just from subscriptions. And of course, you can go and upsell loans, a bunch of other products to this person once you have this captive audience, right? So they're making money, right? Again, fallacy that you can't make money from this consumer. I don't know how many people have heard about this company, AstroTalk. No? Yes? Okay, so I would say it's not really a Bharat or an India to consumer problem because like in professional settings like this, we'll all be like, hey, astrology, no, I don't believe it, right? But I'm sure, like, I'll hazard a guess, 30 to 40% of this audience here in the last 3 months has picked up the astrology section of the newspaper and looked at what their horoscope says, right? It's a very, it's not a religion thing, it's a mental health thing, right? And I think that's the market that AstroTalk has gone after, cracked it after a lot of product iterations. Founder reported revenue run rate of 550 crores with a profit after tax of 100 crores, right? Fantastic numbers. And we still say the Bharat consumer won't pay. Very strange. Kuku FM, content, I'm not talking about ShareChat because I know that data too well. Kuku FM, audio content, entertainment plus learning. 2.5 million paid subscribers, 25 lakhs for audio content, audio books. Do you think people pay for Audible? No, they pay for this because it's in regional language. It's relevant to them. It's a great product. 25 million USD run rate as of October 22, which is a year ago. They're doing much better now, raised a recent round, right? So again, fallacies on the whole narrative of the consumer doesn't pay, right? Like, now what do I do about this? What you should do is not take these at face value, irrespective of who's saying this, right? These are all lazy narratives, right? Easy to say this, nahi paisa deta, I won't build anything, right? But because of that, there's a very interesting set of opportunities which will come, right? They can and will pay if you build the right product at the right price point, which people have done before, both in tech and non-tech, right? But the tech ecosystem needs to go a long, long way to figure that out, right? FMCG has cracked it. Somebody goes and sits with those marketers and figures out what the user problems are. There are 100 companies to be built there, right? Which brings us to a slightly different visualization of the Indian consumer, right? We've talked about this. It's not villages. They live in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns. They speak the local language. And more importantly, they think in the local language, right? It's important to understand this. Thinking in the local language versus thinking in English is a very, very different frame of mind, right? And you will be able to figure out who does that, right? And is young. 65% of India's population, less than 35 years old, half of that in the 15 to 35 bucket. All of this combines to say this is a very, very aspirational audience, right? And we'll talk about a little bit about what this aspiration then brings to the table. Some interesting insights that I've seen, right? Aspirations drives new customer behavior. New customer behavior is always a business opportunity. Something I like to call faux premiumization, right? So premiumization, marketers have heard that, okay, from non-packaged salt, you went to packaged salt, and then you went to iodized, and et cetera, right? And there's 10 varieties of salt, and there's 10 varieties of atta, et cetera. For this audience, there's something I like to call faux premiumization, right? This is a screen grab from a video that a YouTuber did in Delhi's Palika Bazaar, Chor Bazaar, I'm not really sure. If you've seen a lot of people having these white earbuds and you thought they were AirPods, they're definitely not, right? Like normal people can't afford this. I don't have a set of these, right? But if you go to these places, you get one for $15, right? And I'm pretty sure it works decently well. This is how people are making money off the need for premiumization from this audience, right? If you go to Palika Bazaar, they'll give you nice back covers for Android phones, which will swap it out and make it look like an iPhone, the camera and the logo included, right? Now you put it to your ear, nobody knows it's an Android, right? But you have an iPhone. It's a status marker for you. Great, excellent. Food, another interesting category, right? These are 3 variations of Kentucky Fried Chicken from within a 50-kilometer radius of my hometown in Payyanur in Kerala, right? All 3 have different Branding, essentially it's the same product. They're selling you fried chicken with corn flour in an AC environment, obviously at a much better price point compared to KFC, right? Again, smart people have spotted this opportunity, figured it out. Chicken actually is quite a large brand in South India now. I think it has around 50 franchise outlets doing a few hundred crores in revenue. Interesting opportunities if you think about this consumer, keep your eyes open, what to build. More, everybody talks about kiranas. Like 3 years ago, everybody's like kirana tech, हम दुकान में पूरा टेक्नोलॉजी भर देंगे, वो फिर पैसा ले लेंगे, tons of money, etc. But who won? DMart won, right? Why? Because the consumer is aspirational. He doesn't want to go to an old store, ask that Buddha uncle कि आप मेरे को 5 रुपए का लेस दे दो. That Buddha uncle is like, देना है नहीं देना है, ठीक है, मन कर रहा है, maybe not. Suddenly he's got a phone call, etc. Whereas DMart, air conditioned, you have the opportunity of choice. It's a family outing for people, right? This is how consumers are now today thinking about spending their money, right? Kiranas are dead in my opinion, right? Again, going back to my home state in Kerala, 5-6 years ago, my parents moved back there from Delhi. They went to a supermarket chain called Shoprix, which had recently opened. They were like, हाँ, वहाँ पे कोई नहीं होगा, क्योंकि यहाँ पे supermarket में कैसे जाएंगे लोग, right? They assumed the same thing that we did. That place was chock-a-block full. They never went back again. They're like, इतनी भीड़ में हम नहीं कर सकते shopping, right? That's how consumers today are thinking. We are actually way behind the times in terms of understanding what this consumer wants. So again, summarizing a new visualization of the Indian consumer, India 1 is us. Very quick check, if they watched Friends or rewatched it, that's India 1, right? India 2.1, young, aspirational, regional language first, probably middle income, good target audience for new models of e-commerce, new go-to-markets. Give them for premiumization at an affordable price point, right? Reach them in the right channels with the right brands, influencers, whatever you call it. And then there's the rest of India 2.2. So 2.1 and 2.2 was what everybody says is Bharat, nobody can monetize, blah, blah, etc. That's not how it works, right? In my head, extremely large opportunities in India 2.1, right? Fintech, mutual funds and insurance penetration is extremely low, right? And now we have people, again, if you look at your standard mutual fund app, they're just trying to sell you more of the same stuff. Classic fallacy of, hey, this is an India 1 guy, this is the only one who can pay, and hence I need to make as much money of this person as possible, whereas ignoring, I don't know, 200, 300 million of India's population who have a real need for this, right? Again, at the right price point. E-commerce, new go-to-markets. I don't think simplistic digital marketing to reach your tier 2, tier 3 audience is going to work, right? We'll need something clever to get these guys on board. EdTech, yes, sure, everybody is doing teacher-led courses, but there's potentially an opportunity for doing smaller bite-sized learning which people pay for. I recently saw a startup called Pep, which has got funded, which is trying something similar, right? So that's in my head the set of opportunities. Of course, not going to be easy. Lack of understanding is massive, right? Like when people in the ecosystem just keep parroting a very shallow narrative that does the whole system a disservice, right? And of course, it's a tough audience to build for. We don't know enough about them. There's going to be a high failure rate, right? But we need to build, right? That's exactly what this makes it so attractive. People don't understand the consumer. It's tough to build for them. You already have two parts of a very large a business mode sitting right there, right? So let's build. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too much time.